Hello, I'm Michael Chrome, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the annual Sun Youth Forum panel discussion. I'm excited to be here and to be joined by some amazing students. You'll meet them in a minute. In 1956, Las Vegas Sun founder Hank Greenspun and pioneering journalist Ruthie Deskin believed that young people had something important to say. Their idea was to provide a forum where students could come together and exchange ideas on a variety of issues. Southern Nevada high school students continue that tradition today. Participants are assigned to groups where they discuss topics ranging from cell phones in the classroom to the economy. Finalists are selected to summarize the conclusions of their group in a public forum. I'm pleased to be joined by 7 of those finalists here today. Let's meet them. Let's start with you.
I'm Carmen Yos. I'm a junior at Veterans Tribute CTA, and I'm representing the This and That group.
All right. It's an honor to be here. My name is Diego Flores. I'm from Foothill High School, and I'm representing the Law and Crime group.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Garay. I am from Arborview High School. I'm a junior, and my group was School Days.
My name's Gray Anderson. I'm a senior at Palo Verde High School, and I'm representing home in Nevada.
My name's Rachel Pope. I'm a senior at Northwest Career and Technical Academy, and my topic was teen topics.
My name is William Halpin. I'm a senior at Advanced Technologies Academy, and I'm going to be representing Room United States.
I'm Olivia Nikeja. I'm a junior at Advanced Technologies Academy, and I'm representing Around the World.
Great. We have a lot to discuss, but before we get started, let's take a look at this year's Sun Youth Forum.
High school students from across Southern Nevada recently gathered at Cimarron Memorial High School for the 66th annual Sun Youth Forum. This unique event gives students the opportunity to share their thoughts on a variety of current events and social topics that are important to them.
The purpose of this whole thing is to recognize that students have the right to have an opinion. And so we're hoping that we can help them begin to solve the problems of the world. And we feel like they provide a solution to problems we'll have in our society.
The program created by Las Vegas Sun founder Hank Greenspun continues through his son Brian.
And there was no place for young people to gather after school or in the evening. So some of the students at Las Vegas High School went to some of the city fathers or mothers, whoever it was in those days, and said, we need a place. And nothing happened. And they came to my dad's office and they said, we need a place and nothing is happening. He says, okay, we're going to get you a place. But the reason nothing is happening is the mayor and the sheriff and the city fathers and mothers aren't listening to you. So we're going to create an opportunity for you to speak, and I'm going to make sure they listen. And that's how the Youth Forum, the idea of the Youth Forum started.
Students engaged in civil discourse on a variety of topics, including the impact of COVID-19.
I brought up the education drop and the impact it had on people's study habits. I also brought up a lot on the impact it had on other individuals. So not just teenagers, like children as well, who doesn't know that this is happening, because now they're growing up with the experience of a pandemic without knowing what it's like to socialize with others.
The Sun Youth Forum is designed to give students a place to speak and an opportunity for community leaders to listen and learn.
What I really enjoy is when the student who has been quiet the entire time, when the question is finally asked that they want to address, and they show up and they brighten up and they make a point that surprises everybody, and it's exciting to see everyone get involved.
Several teachers and moderators were once students participating in the program. Even though the roles have changed, they keep coming back year after year to help out.
It's crazy just to see how different things are. There's still, some of the same issues, but just how, things change. Like nowadays we talk about the grading policy or, maybe like vaping in schools and different things like that nowadays, whereas back in the day it was a lot more focused on getting kids to college, whereas now that's the norm, or maybe a balance between athletics and school. So just really cool to watch over the years.
Whether sharing an opinion or leading with a new one, this program provides students with a lasting impact and newfound worldview.
Civics education and just being known in politics, it's important for everyone. Nearly all people are affected by politics, and these people should know how their decisions matter and how their opinions and voices should be heard.
By listening, sharing, and connecting with one another, the Sun Youth Forum continues to mold the leaders of tomorrow.
I love to hear it, and I think it's good for them to talk to others and to see that some of the things that they're afraid of, everybody's afraid of them. And actually, if we talk about them, we can maybe be less afraid of them. These are all truly leader students to see how they're thinking about where the challenges ahead might actually be.
Looks like an amazing event and some great conversations. We're now going to give you an opportunity to share some of the discussions each of you had in your groups. Let's get started. Carmen, why don't you tell us a little bit about the session that you were in and what you discussed in your classroom, and let's hear what some of your fellow classmates here have to say about it. So what was your topic?
I was the this and that group. We covered a variety of topics, but the two most prominent of the 4 topics that we got to were the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the influence it had on young women in America, and if there should be a legally mandated classes for parents to take regarding child abuse and child neglect. The general consensus of my room for the Roe v. Wade overturning was, in fact, everybody agreed that we didn't agree with it. We didn't necessarily understand the reason for it. We can recognize that there's 2 points of views to the situation, and that's what really led to this. But my group was really great at respecting others' opinions on it. We said how, obviously, the influence it had on young girls was stress, fear, but also a great point that was brought up was how it can motivate young women and even young men in America to join the fight in politics and to take a career in a career that they can decide their future and others' future, because these choices, they affect our future, and that's something we agreed upon. We said how it doesn't necessarily, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it felt like it didn't necessarily respect the American standards and the values. It was an infringement of our rights, how we don't have autonomy over our body, over our physical being, yet we have these amendments that people want to protect that regarding just mechanical things like weapons, and how those are 2 completely opposing viewpoints, yet the same viewpoints, just opposing answers.
Yeah, so I'm sure you had a room with people with opinions on both sides, but it sounds like it was swayed one way more than the other. What do you all think about the topic and what Carmen has shared with us?
I personally think that was a very great topic. You know, I feel like abortion rights is something that definitely should be discussed a little bit more in America. It's something that should be considered a little bit more. What about you guys?
I think it's a really important topic. Sorry. I think it's a really important topic to get talking about, especially at such young of an age, I guess I'll say, because as teenagers we are still young. I think it's important to have those discussions before we go out and become adults, so that we can start to kind of develop our own opinions before we're influenced by others, and determine what we want when we grow up to be, you know, our next political leaders or those inflicting change. It's important to talk about topics like that from the earlier standpoints, that you're more aware of how to start those conversations comfortably.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, please.
I know for many people it was really scary that Roe v. Wade got overturned because of things like rape and incest, where some of the states are not giving exceptions for that. And for a lot of people in abusive relationships or abusive families, that can be really terrifying to be forced into this position. And it's really medically terrifying, especially for a lot of young girls, where their lives are being put second to the life of a baby that does not exist yet.
Absolutely. So while it may not be your opinion, did you hear you've heard some of the opposing views on it? Why don't somebody speak about what you hear on the opposite side of this topic? What do people say, and why are they so passionate on the other side? 'Cause it's a very passionate topic. William, what do you think?
Well, I think it just comes down to a simple disagreement of views. Some people think that life starts at conception, but others don't believe that's true. My personal opinion is that it doesn't, and I think that women should be able to have the choice to be able to make those decisions for themselves, and that was actually discussed in our room. And we reflected on how just years prior, this wouldn't even be up for discussion because women had Roe v. Wade to protect them.
Yeah, I actually think it's really nice to hear that even though your room had a wide variety of opinions, you were still able to come to some sort of cohesive conclusion, some sort of common ground. And I think that like in the general diaspora is kind of missing. Like it has to be one way or the other, but like the middle ground is often neglected when it comes to topics like this.
Yeah, you have to raise your hand, please.
In our group, we did say how a main driving point of this argument is the fact that it's typically, well, the typical argument of the other side is how people are just using it as a form of contraceptive. And we understood that viewpoint and how it shouldn't just be you're not going to use protection and that be your like go-to. That we understood and we partially agreed upon. But we also said how with the opposing side, like their views also typically co-align with that of the people that are for the Second Amendment and how they have the right to bear arms, and that how can that be a thing is what we said. How can this be you have the right to the Second Amendment about a object, but when it comes to autonomy over our body, it's when you have a say in it. Like we understood that another driving point is religion and you have your views, but at the same time, we can't allow your views to decide what I do because it's your views. And that's not the American way, is that. And that's something we also said that probably relates to more of around the world is how, like he said, like this wouldn't be a debate a couple years ago. But I also, something I thought was very interesting brought up in our group was how if this were a foreign country doing this, America would take a stand and disagree with it. Look at what's happening in Islamic countries with the Taliban and the control that they've asserted over women. It didn't always start like that. There was a time when they could go out in skirts and they could have a job and go walk with their children and talk to people in public. And now look at it now. They can't even speak. Their voice can't be heard in words, not even in song, and how symbolic that is. And I'm not saying that that's what America is, but I'm saying that once restrictions start, we have no idea where it's going to stop. And I think that that's also a viewpoint of the opposing side for we have the right to bear arms is when restrictions start, what's going to stop. So when restrictions on guns are placed, it's a big deal. But when it's my body, my autonomy, I don't have a say.
Great discussion. Any final thoughts on that topic?
I think it's really interesting how you kind of showed multiple viewpoints and perspectives from comparing, autonomy when it comes to certain weapons and autonomy when it comes to your own body, and just comparing the scenarios, because I think a lot of people don't think about the fact that, one, they're applying their rights to something like Roe v. Wade. It also can contradict in other scenarios, like when they want to uphold the Second Amendment when they want to own a gun. So I really like that you showed different perspectives on that, and I think it's really important, especially when you look at like the impacts of Roe v. Wade and how many young women have to travel out of state to get an abortion to save their own lives, and how I believe it was just a week ago another young woman died because the hospital refused to let her have an abortion and it cost her life.
Great. Well, a very lively discussion. We got several more discussions, but a great way. Carmen, thank you for starting us off here. Let's move on to the next discussion. Gray, why don't you talk about your class and what happened in there and the topic of discussion there?
It was actually a very insightful conversation. We touched on a variety of topics, but one that really struck my eye and I wanted to focus on was human trafficking in Nevada and how that interacts with us being such a touristy destination. We discussed how human trafficking often, those vulnerabilities start at home. When you don't have a good support system, it's easier to fall into not so good crowds, and that can lead you down a really dark path. We talked specifically about the resources that are and aren't available in Nevada. I'm sure if you've been at Harry Reid Airport and you've gone to the bathroom, you've seen the signs and the backs of the bathroom stall doors. There's also the murals on the terminal walls and stuff. So we talked about those, how they raise awareness, but we also touched on in schools, the lack of resource availability in schools for children who are suffering at home and don't really have an outlet and don't really have anybody that they can go to. And it just makes it so much easier to fall down the wrong direction. I thought it was really cool how we were all able to recognize the problem. I don't think it's something that we talk about a lot because it's not really at the forefronts of our minds, but when it is brought up, it's something that I think we can all agree is oh yeah, especially in Nevada and in Las Vegas, it's a pressing issue, and it's something that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later.
That's a great point you make. We don't talk about it as much, but it's here, it's in your face. So it's great you all had that conversation. What are y'all's thoughts about that topic and what were the conversations?
In my
like?
room, there was also that brought up of lack of resources. We kind of swayed more towards with gun violence. So in Georgia, we saw a student who shot up his school, and it's all because of like these students are not being given the proper resources to deal with their mental health and to deal with the things that are going on at home. So when they're at home and they don't have these support systems and these parents that are going to listen and care about them, and they don't have that at school, it creates issues where they look for support from outside people, and that can lead to either human trafficking or ideas of violence. And I think that's a really great point that can be pushed multiple ways and can come with many issues.
I really like what you said about that, especially with guns. That was a big topic in our room. I specifically brought up how in Indiana, when they instituted red flag laws, that was actually able for family members and friends close to people who had guns, they were able to report it if they were going through something, and they were able to have their guns confiscated, whatever, and it actually mitigated gunshot suicide in Indiana. So it's like a case in point that we need to focus more attention into the mental health of all of these people, because it leads to violence, it leads to trafficking, it leads to all these things.
Yeah, no, that's what's really good.
I really like the point that you brought up about how we're not really talking about it as much. I feel like when it comes to these bigger issues, a lot of people don't talk about them because they're more taboo. They feel uncomfortable talking about it. The same thing with Roe v. Wade, guns, all that kind of stuff. People don't feel comfortable talking about it. And I think I really like that you brought it up, just because I feel it's important that we're able to have this comfortable discussion about it. So hopefully other people will be able to have those discussions as well, and something will actually come from those conversations.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And something I wanted to add, I do think that the Sun Youth Forum as a whole brings together a lot of the youth and the future of America to start talking a little bit more about more taboo problems. Obviously, human trafficking especially is a huge problem in Las Vegas, the city of sin. And it's exactly like you all said, I don't think we talk about it enough.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I love coming to this, is getting to talk about some of these topics that we don't necessarily talk about every day, and hear your insights. You are absolutely the future. So anything else? What did you think?
I mean, I agree with everything that everybody's saying. I think it's really important to talk about stuff that it may be an uncomfortable conversation, but it's necessary. You can't always talk about things that are happy and rainbows and sunshines, and sometimes you have to talk about the reality of life and the impact that everything has. And I think the lack of resources is something that's really important. It's like, you're right, when you go to the airport, you see signs, but what about, when you're at school, you spend, 7-8 hours a day at school, and there's not a lot of resources. So I think just pushing out the amount of resources and making sure that people are aware of, going back to human trafficking, aware of like common places where people get trafficked, or how people get lured into traffic, how to know the signs of human trafficking and what they can do to help those individuals, because it's a vicious cycle. And I think it's right, a lot of us don't talk about it.
Yeah. And it sounds like your discussion was mainly around Las Vegas and Nevada, but obviously it's a problem elsewhere. We need to find a solution for it. It seems to be very prevalent in our community here as well. So, well, thank you for sharing the discussion. William, I'm going to turn to you. You said you had U.S., right?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. So tell us what your classroom talked about for the U.S. side.
So one of our biggest points was about political polarization. We specifically talked about its root causes, its symptoms, like the media. I brought up 2 very specific solutions for it that could work. We also did talk a lot about guns, and how I brought up how we should have federal red flag laws and background checks if you're trying to own a weapon. For political polarization, I specifically tried to talk about the root cause of it being just how our voting system works. You look at a ballot and you see Democrat and Republican, and those are your 2 choices. But there's another. We can go about this in a different way, specifically ranked choice voting. With ranked choice voting, you can actually vote on people based on their specific actions, their specific policies, not based on their political party, especially because you're ranking them. And it was actually seen, I think, in New York, that when they actually implemented ranked choice voting, they saw candidates less talking about their opponent and more about themselves, which just contributes to a more positive democratic process and much better than what we see in the status quo. So, yeah.
No, that's right. No,
I also want to add on to that. I think the polarization in America, it has to be black or white, blue or red. I think that it in and of itself is a huge problem in America. Because, I mean, take it from people like us who grew in very different households with opposing views, especially myself, where I believe we should start changing for human rights, but I also do believe a lot of America currently is decently solid. So, I mean, it comes to that point where, what am I? Am I a Republican? Am I a Democrat? Where am I supposed to fall on this political spectrum?
Yeah. I bet you that was a lively discussion.
Well, in my room, we talked a lot about like our political views and a lot of racial views and how a lot of that stems from our parents and how we grow up. We discussed critical race theory and how a lot of these hate crimes that are happening in schools and a lot of the slurs that are being said come from the ideas that parents are feeding into their kids' heads. So a lot of the times you'll see a kid who is strictly Republican, but they don't really know what the word means. They only know that, well, that's what my parents say that we should be, and that the other side is wrong and the other side is bad. So this is what I have to be in order to be right or in order to be a good person.
So what's the solution?
I don't know. I think our schools could do a lot better job about educating us on racial topics and political topics. We talked about, in my room, teaching kids critical race theory from the young age and moving them up slowly because it is a heavy topic, but we did talk about how students like in elementary school are experiencing racial discrimination. So if they're old enough to be experiencing this discrimination, they're old enough to be taught what it stems from and how we can change our mindsets and how we can be more tolerant of each other.
Two big topics, talking about ranked choice voting, critical race theory. I mean, where are we going to go with it?
I kind of want to bounce off Kaylee's topic.
Yeah, please.
Or her idea, I guess. I definitely agree with you in that a lot of what children, especially younger children, start to believe is really what their parents are believing, what their parents are talking about at home, because they don't really watch the news. Like a 7-year-old isn't watching the news and saying, that was a bad political decision, because they don't know. That's okay, they don't know yet. And they're learning from their parents, right? So that's where a lot of that belief stems from. And I definitely agree with that. And I think I liked your school idea. I think that's a good idea. But I think we should also look at moving away from the opposing sides, political party idea. When we first started with that, it was kind of to give our country a bit more structure and start to build us up as a nation, right? So that individuals felt represented in government no matter their views. I feel like there's so many views now that we can't just fit into two groups. That's why we've started getting far leftist, Republican in general, far right, Democratic in general. Like we're already starting to split off into mini groups within the full Democratic and Republican. And I think our views as a society don't exactly fall within those two groups. Everybody's different. So trying to fit ourselves into those boxes is what causes a lot of the polarization and a lot of the fights over what's not really the basis of the problem.
So how do we keep the extreme and how do we bring people back to kind of finding that common ground? You're right, there's a lot of extreme views, both directions. So what do y'all think? How do we find that common place?
I don't think there is any single solution that will solve the polarization of America as it is right now. All we can do is try to start working around the issue and then slowly work away at it as we find a solution. I personally think something we should do is to remove the parties completely. I mean, just have people, like they said, ranked voting, just constrained by personal views.
Yeah, I also think that it's important to remember that, like, such a big part of polarization is like the fact that we have so many pressing issues. We have Roe v. Wade, we have climate change, we have so many things that are so pertinent to really our existence and how we go about living our lives. And it gives candidates so much ground to stand on when it comes to extremely radical views. So I think everything is so interconnected. If we're able to start tackling abortion rights, gun violence, climate change, it kind of like mellows everything out a little bit, and it gives us the opportunity to evaluate our candidates for who they are and not what they want to put into policy.
William, I'll give you the final word. This is your topic, so.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that everyone said, especially about parents and education. But a major thing is social media. We see a whole bunch of polarization on social media alone. January 6th was organized on a social media platform. And a thing that I came up with is that we should repeal Section 230 of the Communications and Decency Act, which dictates that social media platforms cannot be held liable for what's held and said on their platforms. The repeal of this would allow for litigation to happen to social media companies for not stopping inflammatory comments and disinformation. And I think that would be really helpful. And I totally agree with everything everyone else said. And I think that this isn't, one fixed solution sort of thing, but I think it's multiple things that we can do. And I think those were my two righteous voting in.
Yeah. No, if it was that simple, we would have done it by now. It's a very, very complex topic indeed. Well, thank you. Olivia, why don't you tell us about your room and what you talked about in your room? I found this a fascinating topic.
We talked about a lot of topics. I think we had a general consensus, but we kind of broke down the impacts of each of our topics. I think two of the most important ones we talked about was firstly, the U.S. giving aid to Taiwan. We know for the last few years it's kind of been looming, is there going to be a war between China and Taiwan? Is China going to try to take back Taiwan because they believe that legally it's theirs, it's under their jurisdicted land? And we kind of were just discussing, the impacts of if and when China does decide to attack and if the U.S. should aid them. I think we all came to a consensus that the U.S. should aid Taiwan when you look at things like Biden promised in 2022 that we would, so we have an obligation to them, but as well as things from a long time ago like the Taiwanese Relations Act where we promised, we will help Taiwan. I think something that I learned from a lot of people in my group was actually just like the economic importance of Taiwan. They were talking about how Taiwan makes up a majority of the semiconductor economy and how it's really important that we make sure we protect their land, not only because the entire country obviously deserves protection and doesn't need to be attacked, and we've made that promise to them, but also for an economic benefit. And then I would say the other topic we talked about the most was actually what the UN should and if they should help women within Islamic nations. There was a little bit of, difference in opinion there. Some people were saying, they should help them, obviously, when we look at the fact that they can't go outside without a man. They can't wear what they want to wear. They can't speak at certain times. They can't sing. A lot of women are being, murdered for just what we would say in the United States is just basic human rights. But I think the split was that if we decide to do something and step in as United Nations, it's going to, one, create issues within Islamic nations when you look at stuff like the 1979 Iranian Revolution, where they were like, we're being too Western, and it created strict regulations within women, and also how it can come off as a form of Islamophobia, because those countries obviously are rooted in their religion. And so Western nations coming in and saying, hey, that's wrong, is going to push the idea that the entire religion of Islam, hates women and they're doing things to be prejudiced against women. Even if in a Western world we believe that, it's really important that if the United Nations chooses to do something about it, they do it strategically so they don't undermine the leaders of those countries, which creates conflict internationally and domestically within the region, but also that it respects the religion in itself.
Unfair, she got two. Taiwan. And then your United Nations role in Islamic countries. Tackle whichever one is of interest. Both of them are very interesting topics. What do y'all think about those?
The reason I speak right now, I think, is the perfect reason why the Sun Youth Forum is a thing at all, because of opposing views, obviously. I do think, personally, the United States of America as a whole should focus on itself first. I mean, if we go down the building that is America, if we go down to the infrastructure, I think it's important that we maintain ourselves first before we can help other countries properly, especially when in the case of Islam. It's a very pressing topic. It's something that is difficult to look into as Westerners because of opposing views, obviously abroad. And I personally believe that we should at least maintain our money and begin tackling the tens of $trillion in debt we've racked up over the years.
I agree with what you said, and I also love what you said. Specifically with the UN and the United States, we are a necessarily good actor in the Middle East. We've caused so many issues. The Iranian Revolution was started because we actually overthrew their first democratically elected leader. So it all happens, a lot of it comes from us. And I think a way that we can actually help start women in Muslim countries is starting here if we in all Western nations and all across the world start respecting women and start giving them actual rights that they deserve and treat them with respect, then I think it's entirely possible that they'll kind of start to mirror that action. And I think that invasive action through the UN or the United States could lead to more controversy and or conflict.
Yeah, I guess it's just a bigger question. It's just how much involvement or how much influence, Western influence, do we have in the rest of the world, whether it be with Taiwan in the semiconductor industry, whether it's, you know, with the Islamic countries. You know, there's obviously stuff in Ukraine. I'm sure your topic went on all the different stuff going on in Israel right now. Yeah, so there's lots of different topics. Carmen, what do you think?
I really liked what you guys said about focusing on ourselves first before we can help these women. And I find myself going back to the Roe v. Wade situation. How are we expected to help women in other countries when women in our country are suffering and being stripped of their rights? It seems very hypocritical of America to say, you're doing the wrong thing. As we recognize it as wrong, how can we not look at ourselves and say, what we're doing is wrong too? Like I said, like those, it wasn't always that way. We know, like we said, like they used to have rights. They used to be able to talk and go places, and then restrictions were placed, and then restrictions were placed. And so I think I agree. We need to reflect inwards and see, are we ourselves becoming not this terroristic country, or like the Taliban, but can we really say what you're doing is bad when we're slowly sort of adopting that in certain aspects, I would say?
Absolutely. I think that was part of what came up in the room too, and where there was the split in decisions. Is with Taiwan, there was an agreed consensus. But with this topic, I was on the side where I said, I think we should stay out of Islamic countries. I think we should let them do their own thing, because like William said, every single time we go in, we just create more polarization. We just create more conflict. Even when you go back to like Winston Churchill, like we're bringing in people to lead their nations so we can get like better oil reserves and stuff. Like it's just, we created such issues within the region, and then we want to go and criticize them and say, you're doing this wrong. But then when you look in domestically, absolutely, we're also doing things that are affecting a lot of minorities. And so I think that's kind of hypocritical to say, you're wrong, but we're right because we're Western. Or you're wrong because you follow the Quran, and we're right because we follow a different teaching or a different practice of religion. And I think it just creates an increase of polarization within the two regions and more conflict.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead, Diego.
And I did just want to add, I mean, let's face it, we're America. We are, in most cases, at the forefront of most politics in the world. I mean, we have the biggest military in the world, and I believe that, especially coming back to the topic of Roe v. Wade, I think it's important that we begin working towards more women's rights, making sure that our women are able to abort in any state in the United States of America. And because all eyes are on us, that means we stand at a podium and we hold this voice that we can sort of start setting a precedent for other nations.
Absolutely right.
Can I add one thing really
Yeah,
fast?
please.
I don't know if you guys have noticed, but if you ever spend some time on social media, a lot of other countries.
What is that?
A lot of other countries love to make fun of America because we're, in their eyes, disjointed. We don't communicate very well with each other, right? It's kind of just a bit radical, other countries believe. And so I agree with what you guys are saying about being very strategic about how we go in and influence other countries, if we do that at all. Because again, what is our place to do that? Why are we taking the mother role over other countries that are, you know, they're sovereign in their own? So I agree with the idea of where do we get almost the audacity to go and rule them when we're not their ruler. I think it's definitely valid to have our own opinions about, you know, their beliefs, what they hold true to them, how they run their countries, that kind of stuff. But I don't think it's fair at all for us to say that we're going to step in and handle this for you, because it's almost like a mom saying, you can't handle this, so I'm going to do it for you, sweetie, just sit down. And that takes the animosity that would come from that is, I think, more than the world would be able to handle right now.
Oh, that's really good. Good way to wrap us up for that topic. And again, it wasn't fair. You had two, so we had to jump back and forth on the two topics. Well, Rachel, since you just finished, let's go to your topic. What did you talk about in your room?
Absolutely. So my room was focused on teen topics. We talked about a ton of different stuff because, as you can tell from our discussions here, pretty much everything has become a teen topic. We talked about mental health, vaping, education, driving, teen pregnancy, all that kind of stuff. But our two biggest topics that we discussed were, education, so such things like specialized education, so CTSOs, CTE education, programs, that kind of stuff, being able to choose program classes like veterinary science or CSI or something like that to get involved in what you think you want to do before heading off to college, but then also looking at year-round schooling and whether that's a viable option or not. We also talked a lot about vaping and social media. We looked at how parents can have an effect, like if they're doing all that they can to make sure that their child is being responsible on social media and if they should increase their influence there a little bit, and then vaping of how, what's really causing it, where is it coming from, are kids getting this idea by themselves? And the general consensus on that one was that it was mostly marketing and the whole popularity scheme of, oh, I'm cool because I vape. It's cool because it's got these cool scents like cupcake and mango lemonade, that kind of stuff. That's why we've moved away from traditional cigarettes, right? Because who wants to smell like cigarette smoke when you can smell like mango lemonade? So that's pretty much what we talked about to wrap it up.
Okay. No, good summary of the room. What do we think?
Kind of touching on your CTE point. So I go to a comprehensive high school, so we do offer like CTE classes, but we're not like West or like Northwest where you have like your major. And I've definitely seen like huge disparities amongst like our Palo population versus West Tech, which is like just a couple minutes away. I see a lot of kids at West Tech are like very confident in the career choices that they've made so early in their lives. And I can tell at Palo, like things are a little bit more disjointed, like there's a little bit less direction there. And I think that CTE courses are so helpful, even if it ends up being something you don't want to do for the rest of your life. Being in that sort of educational environment provides you so many like exceptional experiences and opportunities that are like very hard to get elsewhere. So the value of CTE is very large.
I completely agree. I go to a CTA school and it's focused on public service and safety. So we have a law enforcement umbrella where we have a plethora of things, and then an EMS program where you start from your freshman year and then senior year you're EMT certified. I do CSI there, forensic science, and I love it. I'm lucky enough to have known I've wanted to do forensic science since I was 6 years old, and I recognize that not everybody is lucky to know what they want to do. And there's even kids at my school that go to this CTA school that aren't sure they want to do forensic science or law enforcement or EMT, but in the end, like it is so beneficial. Our school's very small. We have a total of like 700 kids, which is almost an entire senior class in most schools. So we're very tight-knit, we're very close. It's easier to monitor students, but it also helps us career-wise and college-wise. I've gotten so many wonderful opportunities from my school. I've had internships that were amazing, and I got to meet so many career professionals. Our school constantly has law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, lawyers, and paralegals at our school to talk to these students and give them an insight of what it's like. And so they can like gauge if this is for them, if it isn't for them, and the work that actually has to go into it. And I feel like that is so important in our society, is we just decide like, I'm gonna do this, but we don't recognize how much work goes into it. And also I feel like something that we brought up in my group was college and student loan forgiveness, and how there's a lot of student loan debt because people go to college for things that they don't necessarily need to go to college for, or they don't need to go out of state to New York to do this thing that they could have done at their community college. There's a difference in paying off student loan debt for getting a degree in photography than being a neurosurgeon, right? But CTA schools, or even trade schools too, like they give you so many opportunities and they teach you what you need to do and give you options of what path you want to take, whether it's college or whether you want to start interning and shadowing, or I can't remember the word, but following people
and mentoring.
Mentor.
Yeah.
And just figuring out what you want to do in your life. And I feel like that's so important, and it needs to be stressed more.
Kayla, what do you think?
To go on the opposite side of that, that was a really big topic in my room also. We talked a lot about how some schools don't have as much resources or opportunities as other schools, and how many students who go into college end up dropping out of their major because they realize this was not something they actually wanted to do. Like personally for myself, I always thought I would go into medicine, and then I took biomed and I was like, I don't think this is for me. I feel like a lot of our counselors and a lot of our teachers are not as helpful as they could be, especially when it comes to choosing our careers or choosing what we want to do in college. A lot of counselors focus on ensuring that as many students graduate as possible, rather than ensuring that they're happy and that they are going into what they want. So to go off of like what Gray said, there are schools that get really great CTA opportunities and that these students are able to learn all these incredible things. And well, public schools, like I know Arborview, it's a little more difficult for us to get these opportunities and to talk about like what we want to do, and there's a lot of students who are left undecided and kind of lost when they graduate because they don't have the motivation in themselves and their schools are not providing resources enough for them to be able to, get the jobs that they want and go into what they want. A lot of students are, in Nevada, we have really bad dropout rates. There's a lot of students who are dropping out because they don't see the point in school because they're not being shown what can come out of school and what they can do.
Yeah, sounds like there's consensus on this. Try it before you major in it in college. Is that fair to say?
That was almost exactly what I was going to
Please,
say.
sorry, I took your thunder. Go.
How rude. I'm at a CTE school as well. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I've always known that I've wanted to do something with animals since I was like itty bitty, right? I love Doc McStuffins. That was my favorite show. So I knew from day one what I wanted to do. But I think it's really important that kids are able to get those experiences before they get to college because of the student loan debt. So say I wanted to be a lawyer before I figured out that I wanted to be a veterinarian. If I go to law school, that's a lot of debt before I then go to veterinary school, which is more and more debt. So the CTE opportunity and sort of those specialized electives and stuff offers kids that opportunity to see, do I really want to do this? Kind of like your biomed class. Do I really want to do this? I'm taking a year of it. Oh, I hate it. Not a good idea. Don't want to pay for that. So I think that's really where the benefit of CTE lies in, especially with the program system. Like at my school, I know my program teachers so much better than any of my like core subject teachers because I've been talking to them all 4 years of high school. So I have somebody to go to for that reference letter for college. I have somebody to talk to for resources like the mental health or even touching back on human trafficking. I can't say that I've ever been in that situation, fortunately, but I know that I'd feel comfortable if I was in a situation where I was scared. I could go and talk to them and they would help me because I've built that relationship up with them over the 4 years.
Sorry, could I just say something really
Sure,
quickly?
let's wrap it up for us.
I kind of want to disagree with you. You talked about how teachers and counselors don't help you enough, but often at comprehensive colleges such as Arborview, I'm sure you're aware, you guys are overpopulated. There's a huge amount of overpopulation. I'm the son of 2 teachers. My parents have too many students in many of the schools that they went to. It's not just a factor that teachers and counselors don't care to help you in your careers and in college. It's just the fact that they have so much workload with the amount of students that they have, and they have a whole bunch of other stresses that they also have to go through. I completely agree that CTE is helpful, and I think that we should even maybe divert funding from the school district to get them into comprehensive high schools so that people can try out different things that are actually out in the workforce.
Good way to wrap us up. Great topic. I love that. For me personally, yeah, those experiences and kind of getting to try it, as I said, try it before you major in it was key for me, to decide what I wanted to do. So great topic.
All right, last one.
Kaylee, go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
So in my room, we discussed a lot of the topics that we've already been discussing, but one that was very important to me and one that is kind of emotionally connected with me was what CCSD is doing with our grade reform. So we talked a lot about the No Child Left Behind policy, where there are children who are in 5th grade who barely know how to read. I mean, I know personally, I have family members who could not read after 3rd or 4th grade, and they're being pushed through, and they're struggling more in these, in their higher grades because CCSD is more worried about pushing through the students and ensuring they handle the topics properly. And on the other side of that, we talked about GPA cap, and how we understood that CCSD is trying to combat GPA inflation, which is a very real issue, and it makes it really difficult for a lot of people to get into college. But we also saw that when CCSD is the only district that is doing a GPA cap, it makes our admissions look less strong, it makes our students look less capable. And especially for a lot of students who are going to pass that GPA cap, it was really stressful because they're going to take the classes anyway. A lot of us came to that consensus that we're going to take the difficult classes anyway, even if we don't get that reward for it. We do have our school badges now that we have to come in, and a lot of schools are giving us rewards for showing up to class on time, or we're getting rewarded and put in raffles just for coming to school every day of 1 month. And it feels like they're rewarding more the bare minimum and mediocrity rather than students who are going above and beyond. And it's really stressful, especially for students who want to do these high-level colleges that, well, my resume and my transcript isn't going to be as powerful as it could be.
You all feel that way?
I think I would actually disagree on the GPA point. I think absolutely, obviously when you talk about GPA inflation and stuff, but I think it's also important to recognize the benefits of having a GPA cap and how it makes it more equitable for students across the board. When you have people who have more time and they have more resources to take 10 APs versus someone who, is taking 2 APs, but they have to work a full-time job to support themselves and their younger sibling, and they're working nonstop, and they don't, they have to take the bus every morning, or they're walking to school, stuff like that. I think it makes it more equitable. I can say, for my own sister, she took only 5 APs. The other valedictorians that we had took closer to 15, but she was able to secure that spot because she still had good grades, and I think it made it more equitable to look and say, you know what, maybe she had less time or she had other priorities, but she was still able to be awarded for her good grades and her good attendance. So I think obviously, you're talking about, 4.95 versus someone who has a 5.5 applying to Yale. The 5.5 might look better, but I think just within CCSD, especially having a lot of minority students, it makes it more equitable and more equal for the students.
I'd like to kind of comment on that. We're all aware, if you've ever talked to an admissions counselor, they're very much on the holistic review process, right? So they say, we look at your whole application, a job you had to work, if you had to take care of your family members, if you had to, all those outside responsibilities outside of school. So I think it kind of, in my opinion, accounts for that equitable gap that you're talking about. I think that the GPA cap kind of discourages students from taking those higher level classes, and not just because there's no reward, there's just no recognition for what you're doing. In my case, I was on the advanced track in middle school, right? So I was ahead then, and so I don't have choices when I get into high school. I'm taking those advanced classes because I can't drop down to something I've already taken. So I'm already at that level and I have to keep moving at that level. There's really no other choices for me. So when someone's in that position and then they're being told, oh, but you've already hit this level, you're not allowed to go any higher. Why am I taking these classes then? Can I take classes at, other classes that can give me benefits when I apply to college? Because I'm working on filling out my Common App right now. I have to put in a little extra space, my GPA is capped, and explain it, because there's a discrepancy when you look at the transcript of, well, there's all these classes and there's all these grades, but the GPA doesn't really match what the transcript is telling me, what's going on. So there's confusion in that review process. And also, I feel like students kind of just get down on themselves. We're working so hard to maintain 4.0s with high-level classes and all of our outside responsibilities. Why should I not be able to say, this is my GPA on top of everything that I'm dealing with, on top of all of the classes that I'm taking, this is what I did and this is what I accomplished. That has to be diminished as well. And I think that's just unfair if you look at the whole scale.
I think both points are really great. I think that I can see it from both points of view. And I understood what CCSD was trying to do. Our room understood that, well, it's making it more equitable and it's making it more fair. But on the other hand, there's also students who feel like it's just not fair. And there's, a lot of students felt like it was unfair because there would be able to be students who have 4.95 and only took a few APs, and then those who had maybe 20 APs and had a lower GPA because they got a B in one of those. We didn't really understand how that was going to work. If a student had hit the cap and then got a B in one class, would their GPA remain the same? Would it change? And we also didn't quite understand how CCSD was going to deal with they said they were willing to deal with 20 plus valedictorians. We feel like that kind of took away from the honor. There's definitely other ways that students can get rewarded, and there's definitely things that you can say, well, they did this outside of school and they had these responsibilities, and that's really important and special. But I feel like awarding us all the same honor for having so many different accomplishments, it kind of takes away from the personalization of it. Yeah. And it kind of made it seem like CCSD was kind of just lumping us together as, well, you all achieved above this level, so you're all the same. It felt almost like they didn't care.
Grace, did you nodding your head back there? You've got some opinions on this one. What are you
I
thinking?
really liked kind of going back to the No Child Left Behind thing, and then you kind of touched on personalization as well. I think the lack of personalized curriculums is such a problem. Like me personally, I'm an IB International Baccalaureate diploma candidate, so I'm fortunate enough to have like pretty small class sizes because we travel in a group together all day. And from what I've seen, the way that the IB curriculum is structured, it takes such a unique approach to learning. Not only are you sitting in class learning like biology and math, but you're learning about yourself as a learner and who you are in an academic and professional space. And I think a great way to not only bring other kids up to like the same level, but also to make sure that the GPA cap is able to find its place in CCSD is by getting to the root of the problem and making sure that curriculums are keeping students engaged.
Yeah, well, it's never going to be perfect, but I have hope that you all will figure out how to do this and get it better for us. We did have one more topic. You said it was the last one. We still missed somebody. We still got Diego. Yeah. So, yeah, we didn't forget about you back there. Yeah, right. Absolutely. So tell us about your class and what you all talked about, law and crime, right?
Mm-hmm. I came from the law and crime group. It was definitely an insightful group of individuals. I loved each and every single one of them. Obviously, personal shout out, Mr. Vance from the room. He was a great individual. Me and him, I think the reason that I'm calling him out specifically is because we didn't exactly share always the exact same views, but we'd always be able to, respect each other in what we thought about each other's opposing views, and we'd be able to come to a consensus together. Hey, you think this, you think that, that's fine, that's totally fine. But as for the topic I want to bring to you all today, it's definitely a hot topic. It's a little newer. It's how does the recent attempted assassination on former President Donald Trump show the weakening of the Secret Services? And I had some very, very powerful opinions on these, some very strong opinions on these. I mean, first off, the Social Securities, the security services were notified multiple times about a vulnerability on a rooftop, how a shooter could potentially sneak up there and fire at former President Donald Trump. There was obviously clearly some miscommunication between the local PD, where the Secret Services had thought that there was going to be police officers monitoring that building. But I think the main point that we all drove home was that there is no room for mistakes when it comes to the Secret Service, especially when it comes to somebody who's going to be running in the next election. What do we do if the Republican candidate gets killed before the presidential election is set fully in motion? What are we supposed to do? I mean, the Constitution isn't prepared for that, and yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, a very recent topic that came up.
To go off of what Diego said, I think that he's completely right that there's no room for mistakes when it comes to the Secret Service. These people are supposed to be, protecting. They're highly trained individuals. And I think it's really sad that there were citizens who had to die at that rally because there was these mistakes made. And if these are the mistakes that are being made with some of the most important individuals of our country, I think that really shows why we have so many school shootings or public shootings, that if this individual who is so important is not being protected properly, how are we as citizens supposed to be protected properly in school or at work or in any place where we're supposed to feel safe and we're supposed to be learning or, having these great experiences, but that it's a lingering fear in the back of our minds that we're not safe.
Mm-hmm. And just another quick thing to bring things back to the core. I mean, the whole question was, how does it show the weakening of the Secret Service as a whole? And I did want to say, Ms. Kimberly Cheadle, the former director of the Secret Services, stated in front of Congress that she would fight tooth and nail, to make sure that something like this never happened again, only to follow up with a, she resigned.
Yeah, she resigned. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I guess interpret that as you will.
She resigned her office. William, you were jumping in here.
So my first reaction to both assassination attempts wasn't, hey, we really need to up the Secret Service. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, and I think everyone would agree here, that it should be heightened, and obviously there are holes that we need to fill. But my first reaction was, how do people still support what's happening with gun laws? How do we still have states that have zero regulations on who and how we sell guns to people. I mean, if you're old enough, I mean, I don't know. I just don't think that, I think we have too many guns right now, and I think that was my first reaction, not specifically about the Secret Service, was just about the quantity and like how bad these guns are. I don't think that anyone in the United States should be able to have an assault rifle, which is purposefully meant to kill people during war, large amounts of people, and that's what happened during Trump's first assassination attempt. I don't think it's right that anyone has that in this country.
To go off of that, I think that that's a completely great point. Like we saw in the shooting in Georgia, the child shot up the school because his father was able to purchase a gun and give it to him. I think it's really sad in that a country that's supposed to be, you know, so developed and so free that we're still able to buy guns and give them to literal children. And these kids are not able to feel safe in their schools. I mean, I don't remember what school it was, but recently there was a substitute teacher who was found to have a gun on his person, and he was hired and taught at the school. And I think that might have to do with our teacher shortage, but it also has to do with who we're allowing to buy these guns. Like, we're allowed to buy guns before we're allowed to buy alcohol, and I think that's a really strange point that exists in our country.
And there was one personal thing I wanted to bring up with you, Miss. So Foothill High School, as you know, it's a public school. It's definitely a bit, it's a bit strange. I wanted to let you all know, especially with that about like weapons and guns being so freely accessible. I mean, it's so easy to make bomb threats now. Well, our school, Foothill, I'm not sure if you all heard, had a bomb threat about a month ago. I mean, we were all stuck in our first period. We all didn't know what was going on. All we knew was that it came from outside of the country, but we were so confused. And I think there should also, at least in the case of schools, there should be a little bit more defense and a bit more caretaking.
I agree with William. I think the question we should be asking is, you know, why didn't, not like, obviously we need to focus on the Secret Service and why they didn't have better communication with local police and making sure that presidential candidates aren't getting assassinated, but why do people have access to these guns? Why are we allowing them to have such mass weapons? Why are we allowing, you know, he's on his golf course. Why is somebody trying to shoot him on his golf course? Why do they have access to a gun and he's sitting there with this gun for a certain number of hours? Why is someone able to walk into a school and shoot it up? And why aren't we doing more as not only local police, but, you know, as an entire nation, why aren't we doing more to combat this? Because, you know, Donald Trump may have lost his life, but also with gun violence, thousands of other people have lost their lives. Young children have lost their lives. Kindergartners, you know, from kindergartners spanning all the way to elderly people have lost their lives because as a nation, we can't figure out how to have gun control. Whether or not we want to, you know, keep the Second Amendment or abolish it, I think a lot of people are in favor of keeping it, but if you do, there needs to be stricter legislation on who can have a gun. As William was saying, you know, making sure that they're, like he was talking about the state of Indiana and how they were like, if you have a gun and, you know, somebody you know is going to use it for negative intent, you need to let us know. I think making it so a 6-year-old can't grab a gun and go to a school or can't go shoot his teacher, that's not appropriate, obviously, and as a nation, we need to do something to combat that.
Yeah. All right, we give the last comment. Go ahead, Rachel.
When looking at stricter gun legislation and that kind of stuff, I think it's important to remember that guns can also be used for leisure. So hunting and that kind of stuff, it's an activity. It's like golfing. So I think it's difficult to say we're just going to get rid of them in general because that's been a sport since like the beginning of our nation. That was how we survived when guns were first invented. That's how we hunted, and now people use that for entertainment, and that is their decision, right? And I think, oh, I just forgot. Never mind.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
I did also want to add to that. I feel like something we should keep in mind is that the Second Amendment was implemented and created at a time where it was much faster to grab an arrow and shoot from a bow and arrow than it was to fire from a musket. I think that's something we should probably consider as well. I mean, the Founding Fathers couldn't predict a gun that could spray fire with just the hold of a trigger.
I know there's tons of comments on this one. I know this is a hot topic, and unfortunately, we're running out of time here, so I can't go into it further. But if we had a little bit more time, I'd love to talk about. You talked about the parents and should they be liable for and that whole topic. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe off camera, we'll talk a little about that as well. But we need to wrap up now. So. Want to thank you all for just such an insightful conversation. This is my second year doing the Sun Youth Forum, and I'll tell you, sometimes when I get down about, you know, what the future looks like, this is kind of a refresher for me. I come and I hear you all, and feel great about the future and these great thought leaders that you all are and the things that you're doing for us. But before we wrap things up, I did want to hear some final thoughts from you as students. And I guess my final thought will be for you, what's next for you and how do you foresee yourself sitting in your chairs right now changing the world? So what's next after you finish high school for you and how is that going to make an impact on the world? And I will start on the other side this time. So Olivia, why don't you start?
So after high school, obviously, I would like to go to college, and I think I'm going to do something related to international relations, international law. I think, you know, international issues obviously impact domestic decisions. I think the number one thing for me is to continue to advocate for what I believe in and what I stand behind, and to make sure that my voice helps impact other generations in the future. And, you know, I truly just stand behind my values and make sure that the same thing that my grandma fought for, I can continue to fight for in the future, to make sure that generations to come have certain values and they're able to just feel respected as a nation. I think just making sure that we continue to promote the values that we stated when the United States was created, and making sure that they're being upheld is something that I really want to make sure is felt for generations to come.
Great to hear it. We'll go back. William, how about you? What's next?
I'd love to go to college. Okay. Absolutely, maybe political science, something like that. And I'd like to enact change through policy. I'd like to be a part of that process and actually make it work into our system, and hopefully go across party lines and get stuff done, especially with the current gridlock that's in our country right now. And I'd love to be able to accomplish some of that.
Rachel, how about you? What's
I
next?
want to go to college too.
Okay.
Shocker. But I've always had a thing for animals. I like speaking up for those who don't really have a voice. So hopefully in my college plans, I plan to do something with the ocean. So looking at, or at least the environment in some way, looking at climate change and trying to combat how we as humans have had an impact on animals in the natural environment that can't really fight back against us, since we're such a strong force to fight back against, and just making sure that we right those wrongs that we've had leading up to now in our evolution and growth as a society and as a species, as humans.
Yeah, great. How about you?
Well, I do also want to pursue higher education, so I am planning on going to college or university. I want to study international relations, and hopefully public policy will be in the mix there. Something that in the past couple years I've identified as, I guess you could say, my life's purpose is, to put it simply, advocacy through mentorship. I think it's one thing to, you know, have these great conversations and, you know, listen to other people's voices, but I think it's another thing entirely to go out into your local communities, your, you know, domestic, international communities, and do what you can to actually, you know, make the world a better place. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to, you know, get into your community and teach people what you've learned from your experiences and how, you know, the knowledge that they glean from what you've told them can allow them to make a difference as well.
I love it. Thank you.
Well, like everyone else, I would really like to go to college. I want to study law, specifically law with corporations, focus a lot of like removing that monopolization that we have in this country, and how there's a lot of people who have all this money and they don't really care about a lot of the people in their communities. And, you know, to go off of what Grace said, it's one thing to be able to have these conversations. It's another thing to be able to make change of them. So I would really like to be one of those people who has the abilities to make change for those who can't really make change for themselves.
What's your Diego?
And for myself, my plans are a little bit more on or off switch. So I'm all or nothing when it comes to politics. My first initial plan is to either, you know, study into criminal justice, be a defense attorney, civil rights. Those are the two paths, at least in the legal field, that interest me the most. You know, work up a reputation as a lawyer, try entering Congress, try becoming a state senator, so I can actually act upon the changes that I speak of, the changes that I want to bring to the United States of America. And if that doesn't work, UFC.
UFC, okay. About the same thing. Politics, it's the same thing. Yeah. Sounds about right. Carmen, how about you?
Well, like I said, I go to a CTA school, so I'm doing forensic science there, and I hope to go to college, hopefully out of state, and do forensic science. And I'm still deciding if I want to do crime scene collection and photography, like for the FBI, or if I want to do or go into forensic nursing, because I'm very passionate about making a difference and helping people at their lowest of low with forensic science. Like, it's pretty much the backbone of law. You can't make a case in court without evidence, and forensic science is so important for that. And for forensic nurse examiner, there's going to be people that come in that need your help and that need, somebody has to do that hard job. And I feel that I'm the person that can do that, so.
Well, I'm encouraged, even more so after hearing that. I want to be like you all when I grow up. That's where I want to be. Well, let's wrap up. Thank you for joining us. And until next year, this is the Sun Youth Forum.